Kael and Lia stood at the threshold of the ancient temple, staring into the unknown. Instead of making a hasty decision, they chose another path, one of discovery. They needed to understand not only the world, but also the true nature of the power they now carried. As they stepped out of the temple, the air around them thickened. The world they had left behind was gone. Instead, they found themselves in a cold, mist-covered forest. The sky was an endless sheet of grey, and the wind carried the mist in slow, twisting currents, making it difficult to see more than a few steps ahead. Lia instinctively reached for her bow, her sharp eyes scanning the shifting fog. She lowered. Her voice. This isn't where we came from." Kael frowned, flexing his stone-infused arm. There was too much energy inside that temple. Maybe it displaced us when we left. The trees around them were ancient, their massive roots stretching across the ground like the veins of some long-forgotten titan. But there was something unsettling about them. Some roots twisted unnaturally, as if recoiling from something unseen. The deeper they looked, the more apparent it became. This place was wrong. And the silence. The absence of sound was suffocating. No birds, no rustling leaves, no distant hum of life. Just the soft whisper of mist brushing against bark. Lia took a cautious step back and knocked an arrow. "Something's here," she murmured, "watching us." Kael's stone-covered arm pulsed faintly, a low vibration running through his bones. He had felt this before, an omen of something lurking just beyond the edge of perception. But this time, the sensation was different. Not wild and uncontrollable like before. This was deeper, older. Lia knelt by the roots of a towering tree, brushing her fingers over the damp soil. "This isn't normal," she whispered. Kael reached out, placing his hand against the rough bark. The stone's energy surged through him, and suddenly, visions clawed their way into his mind. Echoes of the past. Shadows flickered in the mist. Ancient hunters locked in a brutal battle against monstrous bone-plated creatures. Some of the beasts were dragged underground, disappearing into the earth. A hidden passage. Beneath the tangled roots, a fracture in the ground pulsed with an unseen force. A gateway to something buried, forgotten. The unknown threat. A figure. Emerged from the haze, a being of stone and flesh, its body fully petrified except for its glowing hollow eyes. Its gaze locked onto Kael. Lia suddenly straightened, her breath sharp. Some of the trees had been cut down, but not by axes. The gashes in their trunks were massive, jagged, left by claws. "Something big is out here," she whispered. "And if it's still around, it already knows we're here." Kael clenched his stone-covered fist, his pulse quickening. "This place was a battleground once, and I think it still is." Moving cautiously through the mist, Kael and Lia followed the deep claw marks that marred the earth. The tracks were massive, gouged deep into the soil. Whatever left them, it didn't belong here. It had been brought here. Lia crouched, pressing, her palm against the ground, feeling for warmth, for age. "These tracks, they're fresh," she whispered. Kael's arm vibrated again, the stone's energy flickering beneath his skin. It was trying to warn him, but the message was unclear, fragmented. Then a shift, a flicker in the mist. Lia reacted instantly, lowering herself and drawing back her bowstring. Kael's eyes darted upward, movement in the trees. Something was watching them. Lia's whisper was barely audible. "It knows we're here." Kael tensed. The presence, it felt wrong, familiar, yet alien. As if whatever was out there had once been like him, before it lost itself to the stone's power. And then it attacked, a blur of motion. A monstrous shape burst from the mist, moving faster than anything that size had the right to. Muscles coiled. Under its half-stone, half-flesh body, its twisted frame radiating an energy too similar to Kael's own. But its eyes, there was no control. No humanity left. Only hunger. Kael barely had time to react. He raised his stone arm just as the creature lunged, their impact sending a deafening shockwave through the trees. The force knocked the beast back, but not for long. It recovered unnaturally fast, its body twitching as if fighting against itself. Lia loosed an arrow. The creature twisted mid-air, dodging with an unnatural grace. The arrow embedded itself into a tree, missing its mark by a breath. Kael gritted his teeth. It's not just strong, it's fast. The creature let out a guttural snarl, its massive frame shuddering. Cracks formed along its stone-covered limbs, as if the transformation itself was unstable, an eternal battle between flesh and rock. Kael knew, in that moment, what this thing once was. A person. Lia saw it too. If we don't stop it, we're dead. Kael made his move. He slammed his stone fist against the ground, sending out a powerful shockwave. The beast hesitated, just for a heartbeat. It was enough. Lia fired. This time her arrow struck true, piercing the creature's exposed flesh. A piercing, unnatural shriek echoed through the mist, but the monster did not fall. Kael didn't hesitate. He lunged, swinging his stone-covered fist in a final crushing blow. A sickening crack. The creature staggered back, its red-lit eyes flickering, dimming. It took a few shaky steps, its form struggling to hold itself together. Then finally it collapsed. Silence. Kael exhaled, his pulse still hammering in his ears. Lia lowered her bow, her fingers still tight around the string. What the hell was that? Kael stared down at the motionless body. The mist curled around it, swallowing it whole, as if the forest itself refused to acknowledge what had just happened. I don't know, he muttered. But whatever it was, I don't think it was the only one. Silence fell. Kael and Lia stood over the creature's motionless body. Was it truly dead, or was something else happening? They weren't sure. Leaving it behind would have been the easy choice, but without understanding what this transformation was, they had no way of knowing what other dangers lay ahead. Kael took a deep breath, extending his stone-covered arm. As his fingertips brushed against the creature's body, a strange sensation rippled through him. Lia crouched beside him, carefully inspecting the wound left by her arrow. This thing, it had been human once. But what had happened to it? The body was still warm, yet lifeless. Kael's stone-infused arm trembled faintly, as if whispering to him. He closed his eyes, trying to channel the energy, listening to what the stone wanted to show him. A rustling sound. The crack of stone breaking. A scream. Kael's eyes snapped open. Lia was watching him intently. What did you see? She asked. Kael's voice was heavy. This creature. It was once human. But the stone's power consumed it. Lia frowned. How is that possible? Your arm turned to stone, but you're still human. Kael exhaled slowly. Because I resist it. But this one, it lost itself. Lia studied the creature's face. Parts of its skin had hardened into stone, yet some areas remained organic. Then, does that mean the transformation can be reversed? Kael clenched his fist. If this creature had once been human, then understanding how the stone transformed them could mean understanding his own fate. But how? His gaze fell upon his own arm. If the stone's energy had the power to corrupt, maybe, just maybe, it could also be turned back. Lia's voice was cautious. Are you sure about this? Kael nodded. I have to try. If I can reverse it, then I might not just save this creature. I might save myself. Lia hesitated, then took a step back, her hand resting on her sword. If something went wrong, she needed to be ready. Kael knelt beside the creature, placing his stone-covered hand against its chest. This time he didn't try to force the stone's energy. Instead, he moved with it. A current of power pulsed between them. The creature's body trembled. The hardened stone shifted, fine cracks appearing, not in destruction but in restoration. Lia's breath caught. Kael, I think it's working. But something was wrong. Kael's head swam. Guiding the energy was far more difficult than he expected. He wasn't controlling it, only directing it. And now the power was pushing back. The creature let out a ragged breath. The red glow in its eyes flickered, fading. At the same moment, Kael's arm ignited with unbearable heat. A sudden shockwave surged through his veins, his stone-infused flesh pulsing with an unnatural fire. The stone wasn't just responding, it was fighting back. The energy was rejecting him. Kael gasped, pain shooting through his body. What had begun as a steady current was now a raging flood, threatening to consume him whole. His vision blurred. The creature was healing. The stone's grip on it was weakening. He was succeeding, but at what cost? Lia's voice cut through the haze. "Kael, stop!" His teeth clenched, his body trembled under the strain. His instincts screamed at him to hold on, to finish what he started. But if he did, he might not come back. The energy was taking its toll, demanding its price. With one final act of will, Kael tore his hand away. The connection snapped like a severed thread. A violent pulse of energy erupted from his arm, sending him staggering backward. He hit the ground hard, rolling onto his back as the world spun around him. Every inch of him burned. His heart pounded in his ears. His breath came in ragged gasps. Lia was already at his side. "Kael, are you okay?" His arm felt heavier than ever. The stone had darkened, its surface rougher, as if punishing him for his failure. Had he only made things worse? Lia turned toward the creature. It was breathing. Some parts of its body had returned to normal, but the stone had not vanished completely. Kael swallowed hard, his voice hoarse. "I did it, but not completely." Lia's brow furrowed. "And you?" "Look at your arm." Kael lifted his stone-covered limb. It pulsed faintly, different now, unstable. He had succeeded, but only halfway. Lia placed a hand on his shoulder. "You almost died, Kael. If you had held on any longer—" "I know," he muttered. This had been a brutal lesson. His power wasn't just dangerous, it was unpredictable. He had tried to control it, and in doing so nearly lost himself. He wasn't ready. But this had proven something. The transformation could be reversed, and that meant hope. Kael stared at his heavy, stone-infused arm. The energy within it had shifted. It was no longer the same. Lia, too, was deep in thought. "This creature isn't dead. We can learn from it." Kael nodded. "If it was once human, then it might be our key to understanding how the stone works." But one question remained. Was this creature the only one, or were there more? Kael and Lia exchanged a look. They had to find out. As Kael knelt beside the creature again, studying the still pulsing veins of stone running through its form, Lia noticed something else. "Kael, look at your arm." He followed her gaze. The patterns on his stone-covered veins were identical to those on the creature. Lia narrowed her eyes. "This could be some kind of contagious energy." Kael's stomach tightened. If that was true, then his battle against the stone was far from over, and he might not be fighting it alone. Kael's thoughts swirled. His connection to the stone had become a part of him, but the creature, it had lost that connection. Mindless, consumed entirely by the stone's will. Kael placed a cautious hand on the creature's chest, focusing, trying to sense the energy. Within, and then, he heard an echo, screams, a forest, people running, a hidden cave. For a fleeting moment, Kael was somewhere else, not in the present, but in a fragment of memory, one that did not belong to him. Beneath the rocks, concealed, from the world there was an ancient cave. Kael's eyes flew open as he gasped for breath. Lia's gaze sharpened. "What did you see?" Kael didn't know exactly where it was, but he could feel it. "There's a cave here," he said quietly, "and within it a greater source of the stone's power." Lia's expression hardened. "If there's more knowledge there—" Kael nodded. "Then we need to find it.